Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp and I am the Executive Editor of Dataversity. We would like to thank you for joining today's Dataversity webinar, Emerging Trends in Data Jobs. This is the March edition in a monthly series called Data Ed Online with Dr. Peter Aiken, brought to you in partnership with Data Blueprint. Now let me give the floor to Megan Jacobs, the webinar organizer from Data Blueprint, to introduce our speakers and today's webinar. Megan.
Thanks, Shannon. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Megan Jacobs, and I'm the webinar coordinator here at Data Blueprint. We are pleased that you found the time to join us for today's webinar on emerging trends in data jobs. As always, a big thank you goes out to Shannon and Dataversity for hosting us. We'll get started in just a few moments after I let you know about some housekeeping items and introduce your presenters. We have 1 hour for the presentation, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. We'll try to answer as many questions as time allows, but feel free to submit questions as they come up throughout the session. And to answer the top 2 most commonly asked questions, yes, you will receive an email with links to download today's materials and any other information you request during the session within the next 2 business days. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We've set up the hashtag DataEd on Twitter, so if you're logged on, feel free to use it in your tweets and submit your questions and comments that way. We'll keep an eye on the Twitter feed and we'll include answers to those questions in our post-session email. Now, let me introduce you to our presenter, and Peter will be presenting our special guest for today. Peter Aiken is an internationally recognized data management thought leader. Many of you already know him or have seen him at conferences worldwide. He has more than 30 years of experience and has received many awards for his outstanding contributions to the profession. Peter is also the founding director of Data Blueprint. He has written dozens of articles and 8 books. The most recent is Monetizing Data Management. And Peter, I understand that you're just off a plane, so where are you coming from today?
Yeah, kind of ripe off of a red eye, coming back from San Diego, where we had a group that we were working with out there. So welcome, everybody. This is a really fun opportunity. I get to work with 2 of my favorite people in the world. Let me introduce, first of all, Eva Smith, who I've known for at least 10 years at this point. Eva is located up in Seattle, Washington, where she is working with Edmonds Community College and in particular supervising a grant that is focused on how to help people get more into these careers. And she's going to talk to us about some of the some of the success that she's had with that grant on this. So Eva, welcome. Thank you for taking the time on this one. And
Thanks, Peter.
Oran. Sorry, Eva. And Mehmet Oran is Director of Sales Solutions for Salesforce.com. And he is first of all, phenomenal stylist and dancer, but he ran a data management group at Genentech before this, and we've had lots and lots of conversations around these areas. And really just being able to pull it all together and to work with us is great. And Megan, before I let you go on this as well, thank you for 2 years of excellent service at Data Blueprint. This is not goodbye, but again, congratulations on your 2-year anniversary with us as well.
Thanks, Peter.
And so what you're seeing here are the sort of general foci that we have to bring to this. And Eva, I'll just turn it over to you for a quick second and let you articulate a bit on this, and then I'll turn it over to Mehmet, and then we'll dive in.
So basically, we are working on the why is the data profession so hot, and we're talking about how do we enable intentional development of potential people who are interested in getting into this career, but also once you're in the career, how do you progress through this career? And this is something that we've been talking about for quite a while in data management. And so we'll turn it over to Mehmet to talk about a little bit more about why is the data profession so hot.
And my angle on this has been, as a consultant, as a professional, I had a chance to work with many individuals. Personal development and career development are both passions of mine, and I always, sought after ways of better supporting people, getting people within and outside of the profession to understand what is it that we do and how to do it better. And through various brainstorming, both with Eva and Peter, we noticed that we have complementary points of view that come from fairly different points of origin, and I look forward to being a part of the conversation today.
Thank you both again for joining us on this. I've been concerned really for the last 10, 15 years about raising the profile of data within organizations, and you'll see on the slide here, I like to call it our sole non-depletable, non-degrading, durable strategic asset within organizations. And if that's the case, we really do need to play around with it and focus particularly in this area. So this is a slide that we kind of put together to talk a little bit about conventionally what we're trying to get into. So you can see sort of three different perspectives. And again, Eva, particularly congratulations on getting a grant in that area, because it's been hard to get the governing organizations to look at this. It's really much of a case of they don't know what they don't know in this. So Eva, did you want to talk a little bit about this?
Well, so, as I've mentioned, I work in education, or have been working in education. I've been in data management 20 years or more, but recently, in the past 10 years in education, we work at community colleges in particular. We have people who are coming in from mid-career points of view and changing jobs, and or even younger people who are interested in moving into these kinds of careers. And so we have we're consistently asking ourselves, how do we organize information and programs around preparing people for work in this field. And some of the areas that we're looking at are, basic entry-level positions, but also what happens when you get into mid-career positions and how do you actually get into this. And so we're talking about how do you actually, rather than people falling into this career, how do we work through these different titles and roles and their scopes and develop programs.
Great. Mehmet, did you want to add anything on this one?
So one of the things we are hoping you're going to get out of this is reusable frameworks you can have for yourself or for your organizations, depending on what role you play, whether it is about developing people in particular skill sets throughout a given role, switching roles, getting into the field, and hopefully these four symbols will serve as placeholders as you go through it.
And the key you can see here is that there's a concept around working with data, and again, sort of duties and titles that are there. One of the graphics on this chart that might not be familiar to some of you, though, is the circle in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. This is what we've called for years and years the Dama-Dimbach wheel. And what we now have is a codification, if you will, whereas before the year really 2009, when you talked about data management, it was very difficult for people to conceptualize it. So lots more on that particular topic that we could get into it maybe in the Q&A section. But Mehmet, I think you were really looking to hit this particular question on it as well, which is what is the data profession and why is it so hot?
So we have a pretty strong interest in this session, and I think one of the reasons for it is data is not just being talked about in the back of IT departments anymore. Harvard Business Review and some of the well-published business journals have all been writing about data and big data and the idea of the data scientist being the next big thing. When we look at the data profession, however, data profession is hot in general. If you have experience understanding data, making best use of data, making designs that is going to take advantage of data, all of these roles are being really sought after, and there's a thirst in how people can get additional skills and abilities to perform these jobs better. And while data scientist is one of the newest titles or roles that is emerging, my hypothesis to you is it is not the only hot field. Now, the interesting thing about the data world is it's still not that well understood. In fact, if we were to look at the definition of what a scientist is, since this is where the most emphasis appears to be, Peter, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Now, we have some common, definitions that I was able to pull up, online, where a scientist is described as someone that focuses on research. An engineer is someone that focuses on taking research, academic principles, best practices, and turning things into something that can work. Knowledge worker in the field of data is someone that uses the information. If you were to take a historical example, when the telegraph was put in place, it took linguists to look at word patterns to come up with the alphabet. It took mathematicians to figure out how lines can be transmitted. It took engineers to make the device work. And then it took people observing telegram operators in order for the information to be transmitted correctly, and then the equivalent of economists to figure out how to monetize it or not monetize it, which is why the technology evolved. Now, when we look at data analyst on the other side, looking at the same site I pulled these other definitions from, data analyst is described as a much more comprehensive role, as if it's the person that can do everything. And in reality, this, I would say, is much more of a description of the data professional. And the data profession is composed of many, many other types of roles. If you look at it in the context of IT and how some of the IT roles may relate to each other, I think we can look at this as a spectrum of entry-level roles evolving into more senior roles. And when people are starting in this field, and if you think about your typical IT project, whether it is for reporting, whether it is for integration, application development, we have a combination of people in a business analyst, data analyst, developer type of roles. If you think about what an IT department does in general, you also have people like support specialists that actually talk to end users of applications more than most developers, ever would. So they have a better sense of the type of, information that may be needed or how information may need to be presented. So when you look at the career paths, and we'll get into some of these in a much deeper level of detail, I firmly believe there's a natural progression people can evolve into as they evolve in their career, or as they, either through personal experience or education, look at where else they can go. So, with that, I will follow the cues of the slides. Let's talk about how, once you decide that you want to be in the data profession and you understand there are different roles, what are the different ways you can get into the field? And Eva, who's the educator of our set of three, is going to take the lead in this area.
So, Mehmet, my question is, how does someone actually get into this profession? And that's one of the questions that I get constantly from people who are mid-career changers or students, because how do I get into this thing? So one of the areas that we've begun to look at is how do we actually, what are the roles and what are the different attributes related to this? And so one of the things that, and then Peter, you have another profession or another view on this as well.
Exactly. I'm really interested in sustainability, and how do we, once we take the good work that you've done, and Eva, you know this from working, and we should point out not only is Eva in the educational world, but she's also been a practicing professional for a long time as well. So she's well qualified to comment on this. But when we look at this, we've also got to go back to the college and university accreditation bodies and tell these folks that this stuff is important. Because right now we have a case of they don't know what they don't know.
So the typical answers that I get from data management professionals when I've asked my colleagues in this field is, how do I get into this career? It's very elusive. I just fell into this role is pretty much the common thing. An opportunity came along in my company. Another data professional that I knew, said, come on in, you'd be great in this field, and mentored me. Some people, a lot of us have found the Data Management Association or other professional association and found a home there and said, oh, yeah, I love this stuff. Or I took a class and, or, you know, for a lot of folks that have been in IT, they've all of a sudden had, you know, realized that data is important and really wanted to make a difference in this area and began to try to find a way to improve the quality of data and the use of data in organizations. What's not so typical and is, you know, nobody's talking about this in high school. Nobody's really talking about it much in college in terms of a profession. Most college programs have a database design class or some class on database theory. And those are in computer science, some of the business programs as well. And there's really not that many degrees. And as we'll talk about in a bit, that is changing, but there's not that many college degrees there in data management specifically. So I also found early on when we were looking at building curriculums at Edmonds that we took a look at the Department of Labor Occupational Handbook, which is where most career counselors in high school and college send students to look for the types of jobs they might be interested in.
And just to add a point to that, Eva, if the federal government doesn't measure it or keep track of it, it probably doesn't exist in a lot of people's minds. So very important point that we put things in place there. That is absolutely true. And in fact, what I also found in working with in college, the college environment, is that for those that are relying on financial aid, for those that are reliant who have been laid off and are getting worker retraining money, they look at those kinds of government publications as ways to identify high demand areas to fund and whether or not somebody is qualified for funding for certain types of programs. So the other part of this is that we've over the past 10 to 12 years in Data Management Association, we've been trying to take a look at the elusive data management career. There was some work done a while back in 2006 on a survey at an EDW conference by Andres Perez about what is a typical data professional. Back then, in 2006, the typical professional was approximately 45 years old, had around 20 years of experience, and typically began this in the mid-20s. And so it really became clear that this is something that occurs partway through somebody's career, mid-career, and requires quite a bit of experience. And in recent studies, however, and in recent publications, there's a much more interest in this area. 2013, the demographics began to change, and a lot of that is because of the big data conference and a lot of attention on big data. Even in academia, we're hearing a lot about big data. And so this has sort of fueled more interest in this field. And so I'd like to take a look at the ladder on the left because, one of the things that we often sort of compare ourselves to are the professions. So a lawyer, for example, is you train for throughout your college career, and there's definitely a path for it. And a computer designer, is another example. You train for your career, and there's a path for it. So colleges can develop programs around that. For us, it's been difficult because there isn't a clear path, and so there's kind of a gap there in between the time that you graduate from college and the time that you actually get into some sort of a data career. So, let's move to the next slide. So part of our problem has been classification. And in data management, we know a lot about classification. And a lot of it, again, we
look at those classifications when we're thinking about what we want to do in our careers.
But of course, people aren't coming to career fairs and things and asking IT departments to put them in as data professionals, because the IT departments don't recognize it as a career, and consequently it's a chicken and egg situation. Now, Matt, you had a comment about the...
The other aspect of it is, I think there are preconceived notions. So for those of you on the phone that have young daughters, the last picture may be much more familiar to those of you that do not. Merida was one of the first non-typical Disney princesses because she actually, wielded weapons and made her own decisions and pushed back on it. So she challenged the idea of what a princess is or is not supposed to be. Similarly, I think we talk about what a data professional is or is not supposed to be, and we strive to understand the meaning of titles. We strive to understand the meaning of words, because semantics do matter in human communication. And if we think, for example, a data modeler is someone that's going to take 6 months coming up with academic designs that we are never going to implement, and I throw in some buzzwords that sometimes can have negative connotations in that sentence on purpose, the role is not going to evolve as much. So part of what we are trying to do is talk about the roles in order to enable individuals to be as effective as possible in their organization, and make sure that they're going to be able to have the right set of skills and the right set of abilities. The other part is recognize that while these are roles that are broadly based, defined in their nature, people may end up having different business titles given either their broader responsibilities or the nature of the work culture that they are a part of. Because what you're going to see is, while we have these titles, as Eva mentioned earlier, they are not reflected by the government-managed long life cycle taxonomies either.
Matt, if I can add on to that as well, another challenge that we have is we have varying sizes and shapes of IT departments. So a smaller IT department is much more likely to have a blended sort of an approach than a very large IT department that may have very specialized components in it.
Absolutely. So, as a data person, what I would say is we need to actually differentiate what a role is supposed to do and what a title may mean. They are related but different things. So, and Eva, you alluded earlier that there are some challenges with the U.S. federal government's classification of the professions, even though it is evolving.
Yes. So, like I mentioned, early in the 2000s, we talked about we were looking at programs at Edmonds in particular. We were looking at developing a program in data management and looking at what the different rules and titles were out there. And back then, there were really only a few. Everything was classified into database administrators and computer systems analysts. So it was really sort of difficult, and still is sometimes, to explain to people what a data management professional is. So Data Management Association actually did begin to work with Department of Labor to look at some of those roles. And now, today, this is a snapshot from the ONET online. You can see database architects, critical data managers, data warehouse specialists, business intelligence analysts are showing up as categories within the ONET. And as you can see, database architects have a bright outlook, which from the perspective of the folks doling out the financial aid, that's what they look for when students ask to be in those kinds of professions. So we're actually beginning to make some progress in this area. And making sense of that is part of our job, I think, in the profession, to try to help people understand. And yeah, we still have quite a ways to go. As you can see, this is directly from the ONET. This title represents an occupation for which data collection is currently underway. They are still in the process of identifying what database architects are, but you can see there's a reasonable definition for that now.
And really the other part of this is that if it's not there, it's not going to happen, and yet we don't have a professional, we have a volunteer group that's doing this. And again, Eva, you put in a lot of your time and effort to make sure that happened. So we now have a start, and we need to carry on.
Correct. So we're actually looking at, and this is one of the things that, as Peter mentioned, Edmunds recently received a grant to put in place actually certification programs that are self-paced and online, and they're IT programs. But one of the programs is data management focused. And as part of this program, we brought in a group of professionals who've been working in the field in a focus group to talk about skills, knowledge, and abilities of each of these different areas in IT and in data management. But in the data management one, we collected some information. One of the questions that we asked the focus group attendees was, what are the preferred attributes that are required of a typical data management professional? And you can see the ones that jumped out, these are the abilities that somebody who would be good in this profession, who typically works in this profession, would be likely to make them successful. So you can see the big picture is important. Organization skills, communication skills were ones that popped out as important. And then we went along and also talked about the knowledge areas that would be necessary for somebody who works in this field. And some of those knowledge areas were very well aligned with the data management body of knowledge as well. So modeling concepts, technical data structures, principles and frameworks were all areas that that came out as a knowledge that somebody in this area would need to have. And of course, we're continually asking those questions. How does one get that knowledge as well? And then we also looked at skills. These are things that people need to be able to do in order to be successful in the types of things that they do in their work. So organization and planning was pretty consistently across all of the professions. Using tools, and those could be a variety of different tools. And one of the areas we talked about quite a bit in this focus group was facilitation, communication, modeling skills came out as high areas of that are across all areas of data management type jobs. And then we ended up putting all of this together into what a typical work profile would be. Now, it's really important that the work that we understand in terms of developing training programs or certification types of programs, that we understand what the typical work is for these types of roles. So, and these are the tasks that came out: project management, data modeling, data quality analysis. Now, I also want to point out this is not a scientific study. This was just, talking within a facilitated session with some of the data management professionals in the Seattle area. So but it did give us quite a bit of information to start with, and it also, again, aligned very closely with the work that we've done with within DAMA, with the data management body of knowledge and the certifications, that the CDNP certification.
And we mentioned this before. Again, the DIMBOK had not existed prior to 2009, so it was difficult when we talked to people for us to point them to anything to read, which is generally one of the first things they look to. So you can see here we derived it and modeled it after the PMBOK for project management, the BA-BOK for business analysis. There's a SWE-BOK for software analysis. There's an EA-BOK, and now there is a DM-BOK.
And the interesting thing, too, Peter, was that as we went through the discussions in this focus group, it was pretty clear that data management crosses all of those domains and intersects in many ways. So we are actually, in order to work in it and progress through this, people get to know these other boxes as well. So Mehmet, how do we get hired?
and really, Mehmet, he's interested from a career perspective, but also he's very interested as a professional manager within Salesforce.com to make sure he's got people who can build that company and continue to grow the really interesting things that Salesforce has been doing at this point.
So, before getting into the details, this is an area I actually want to tell a story, a real story about that may resonate with most of you listening, whether you're a manager or you're an individual contributor. Number of months ago, and what got me going on some of the details you're going to see in the next few slides is I had an individual contributor who was an incredibly effective data analyst. And given the type of people I had managed in my past, I had a good sense of, I felt he should have in terms of his level of seniority. Based on that, I wanted to be able to make a case for him to be promoted. In the meantime, I am also managing other individuals, and they want to know how am I doing and what do I need to be at the next level. And my management philosophy has always been, we should always help develop you to be able to perform at the next level. And once you can, then we can make an effective case of making the title adjustment reflecting the nature of the work that you do. The challenge with that approach is, you need to have a clearly enough defined criteria for people to demonstrate what they can do. And it is not how many languages you know. It's not even how many years you have been in a given field. This field is arbitrary as trying to estimate code complexity by the number of lines of code versus how well something may actually be written and how flexible, how well performing. So as I started going down this path, I started working with the organization also on how can we define career paths for the most well-defined roles in our field, looking at the type of knowledge they're supposed to possess, the type of skills they need to have, and the type of attributes that they need to display in the way they work. And just to tell you how the stories ended, we put together career ladders for the data analyst as a role. I'm working on data steward and data architecture tracks also. Got some good feedback from DEMA International board members, as well as our HR department. Absolutely loved it. Rolled it out to other managers that lead data professionals, and use the material to coach other individuals on what they want to do in their career in general, even if they just wanted to get into the data analyst role. So the next few slides are based on real corporate implementations, and I hope they would help you also. So let's start by understanding the role, and then we'll get into understanding the expectations and how they will evolve over time. Peter, can we go to the next one?
You got it.
So the first piece was making sure people understood what a data analyst is supposed to do, what a data analyst is supposed to be. And we want to start with a common definition and also say that while there are common academic backgrounds that drive people to this, there are many other academic backgrounds that people can get trained because they are passionate about data, they understand historical trends, they want to project it for future possibilities, and in order to come up with this. And then we said, okay, once we have a common definition of what a data analyst is supposed to do in general, let's understand what we can expect given there are different levels of experience and there are different needs for different levels of experience in a given field. Can we go to the next one? Great. And if you look at it, especially if you have large organizations, you're going to need to have people that are very good at predictable operational work to make sure things that are supposed to happen, and being able to perform some rapid analysis when deviations take place. You're probably not going to see a lot of Harvard Business Reviews being written on the most effective, operation analysts in the organization, making sure there are no breaches, etc. However, they are essential, and they can also be an incredible wealth of, human capital for people to develop into for the higher levels. We are having a lot of conversations, however, on, what the data analyst can or cannot be for a company. And a detail you may catch is, yes, I am absolutely classifying data scientists as a data analyst role, because the more senior levels you're in, as you can read in these descriptions, the more you're expected to come up with hypotheses in order to fulfill particular end results for the organization. That is very much what a scientist does, and scientists in their earlier career also start often as a lab technician, understanding how to conduct experiments, how to do measurements. They are focused on making sure that their measurements are in fact going to be accurate, precise, repeatable, and they get to higher levels of, design approach, project accountability, the more seasoned they get. Now, to continue the aspect, if you understand the role, if you understand the expectations from a given level, then it is really important to know what are the skill and ability expectations that comes with that as well. So if we move on to the next one and just look at what an operations analyst could look like, and then we'll contrast it to a senior analyst for examples. Can we go back to operations analyst, Peter?
Sorry
about that. So the most important attribute when you're accountable for operations is disciplined execution and consistent results. You want to make sure that people in these roles are able to repeat things the way they're supposed to be. If there's a need for escalation, they're going through the escalation process rapidly. And they are also keen enough to identify opportunities for additional ongoing improvement. Operations analyst is an entry-level role, so they are going to be learning the data, they are going to be learning the systems, their technical capabilities is going to be much earlier from their life cycle. Now, if you compare that to a senior analyst, at this point, they are not focusing on repeatable tasks. They are actually being given problems to solve. And what is going to be expected from a senior analyst is once you give them a problem, they should actually figure out where to find the answers to solve the problem. They should be able to go ahead and find different data sets. They should be able to come up with a different type of algorithms or technology tools to do the data set. Maybe statistical analysis is going to be the best way to come up with clusters. Maybe they are going to need to have a combination of SQL and Excel, or R and Tableau. Tools are going to matter a lot less. How they approach the problem is going to matter a lot more. And what you also see in these slides, and there's going to be a full hour-length detailed session on these career ladders at Enterprise Data World for those of you interested. For individuals and for managers, it is important to be able to describe what kind of work would I expect someone to be able to do at a given level. So this is why you see the sample BI need or sample data quality need, that if someone says, I want to be a senior analyst, how do I get promoted? One of my answers should be, here are the type of problems I need you to be able to own and deliver. And here are the skills you need to display, and here are the behaviors. So when it comes to evolving in our careers and getting to the next level, it is refreshing to see that we are starting to talk much more about skills and abilities instead of talking about years of experience and how many technologies someone actually knows. And it looks like our slide is lagging one slide behind. However, you'll see the full set of content again as part of the distribution.
So Mehmet, if I can just summarize one of the points that you're making is that subtly I think you're saying we've already got a data scientist category out there. We've been operating on it for a while, and there are people that have developed these knowledge, skills, and abilities. Now we're trying to articulate it perhaps a bit better.
Absolutely, Peter. And if you look at some of the development programs that are evolving, because data scientists is so hot and there are not enough data professionals that can do effective analysis, there are development programs here in Silicon Valley that will take people who have a hard science background because they already know how to hypothesize, how to ask questions, how to look at data, and they give them the additional technical skills. In this case, they have the ability, but they might not have the tools. I'm also seeing some people who have been doing more the traditional data analysis with reporting type tools and then wanting to understand how to get into higher levels of more complex analysis. And then the coaching we provide to them is much more about additional abilities, about being willing to take risk, being able to, fail fast and, recover quickly. These are the phrases I often use. So they feel comfortable being able to come up with alternative ideas, evaluate them on their merits. And development programs are also evolving, and they're all based on the type of work we've been doing for a long time. Are we focusing on analyzing the data, using it at a high level, controlling it, or, are we focusing on building systems to deal with the data? I fundamentally believe there are 6 core types of things we have been doing for some time and that we will continue to do, which is what gives us the longevity in this profession to be adaptable, even as technology changes.
Absolutely. Let me ask Eva to jump in just a minute here, but I'll say some of the work that we've done here. And one of the things that was so fun to put this together was that Mehmet and Eva had sort of come to their conclusions independently of each other. So we kind of, wow, you've got chocolate and I've got peanut butter kind of thing, and then I added sort of maybe the s'more in the middle of it, the marshmallow stuff, just to completely come up with an unhealthy example on this. But we've been looking at the data scientist career as it's been implemented in most organizations, and we find they're about 20% productive. When we talk to these individuals at conferences and things, they say they spend 80% of their time because they don't have the knowledge, skills, and abilities that Mehmet and Eva have described to us so far. And so, basically the organizations throw them into a thing and say, here's a problem that we need you to go solve. And they say, great, where are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that I need in order to put this in place? And learning statistics is not going to be helpful if you don't understand how to best manage your data. You're going to be very inefficient at managing that particular process. Eva, any comments on that?
No, absolutely. And again, we need to start building those skills if we want to look at it from a holistic perspective. We need to start building those skills from a very young age, actually, and begin to build, bridge the gaps there between college and the point where people actually move into this level of profession in terms of building the underlying skills and sort of behavioral things that will make them successful, as Mehmet pointed out.
And so
you're going to go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure every one of you watched the President's State of the Union every year, but 2 years ago, President Obama actually did mention data management as a career role that was important for transitioning in there. And we investigated and said, where did that come from? And it was a group of community colleges, as Eva has related to us, that had gotten together and said, this is an important career field. We think we can make a difference here. So maybe it's a community college-based initiative if we can't get the 4-level colleges to pay attention to this. Mehmet, anything else on this, or are we transitioning to the more senior roles here at this point?
No, I think that's great, and I think we're going to probably have many more late-night deep-dive conversations on how do we evolve our teams, people, profession in general at the upcoming physical encounters too.
Absolutely. As Mehmet mentioned, not only do we have a session coming up at the Enterprise Data World Conference on this, Mehmet's going to present these concepts in more detail. We're also going to throw together a birds of a feather session. So if some of you have ideas around this, please look to that as an opportunity. So this next portion here, I want to acknowledge my friend and colleague Ken Shepard, who I've met in the last year and become quite good friends with. He's introduced me to something called levels theory. And the key is that it's based on something that Elliot Jacques, who put together requisite order. And it sounds a bit academic, but it's actually quite practical. And the analogy that I like to use in it is that if you're in production research and understanding things, one of the books you may or may not have come across is something called The Goal. And the goal is a very insightful way of describing the theory of constraints, which actually relates back to Richard Dawkins' the selfish gene concept, interestingly enough, but we don't have time to go there on this one. But requisite principles look at patterns of language obviously moving from the concrete, very low levels, to higher and higher levels of abstraction. And as Mehmet and Eva have both described, looking at the ways in which we expect the various knowledge workers in these situations to approach a problem. And a junior person, we're going to expect them to be closer with techniques, and a more senior person, we're going to be more concerned with looking at problem solution development. Now, this requisite order, I'm going to present it to you just very, very briefly in this chart. It has 7 levels, and it starts out at the very bottom with what we call a frontline operator, somebody who is not typically thought of as management, and that they have a very prescribed function, operate this machine, perform this task, interface with these customers. Their planning horizon is really going to be less than a quarter in most instances. The second level up then is a line manager, and their focus here is on an operational function that is not as prescribed, but certainly not as vague as we're going to see at the top of the chart. And their planning horizon is a little bit less than a year in this particular situation. Then a director, a department manager, and again here the focus is on evolving the department or optimizing the department with a 2-year planning horizon. The fourth level is a VP or a general manager where they're taking care of an entire organizational unit, and they're looking around, in this case, 2 to 5 year planning horizon. Then we get to level 5, which is a president, a managing director. They're in charge of a business unit. They have a 5 to 10 year planning horizon. And executive vice president at level 6 for a multi-business organization with a 10-year to 20-year planning horizon, and the CEO in a 20-plus year focus on this. Those of you that have read any of Jack Welch's material know this is the type of thing that he was thinking about when he finished his career at General Electric. So one of the things that we did with this material was to try and put together a set of professional pieces that talk specifically about how would this work in the data management community here. And you can see we've got, again, the front line of sort of a data steward down there at the bottom. These are not hard and fast. And what we're really talking about here are data management career titles. Now, that's the last thing, of course, we want to confuse the HR directors with. But this is for really making big efforts. And in particular, it's going to apply to larger organizations, the federal government in particular, but again, big IT organizations, smaller IT organizations, they're still going to need combinations of these functions. And we can look to requisite theory for some guidance in these areas on how, if you have a small IT shop, much less a small data shop, how you can use these theories in here. So again, a steward, a manager, a modeler, the director, the chief data steward, might have a 2-year planning horizon here. A deputy CIO, in this case, might be a 2 to 5 year career field on this. And again, just working our way on up to a chief data officer, which we won't have a level 7 in our thing because a data officer is probably always going to report into the C-level of the organization, somewhere around that. So this presents us with, yet again, a series of challenges. And quite frankly, it's going to be a little harder to get some energy around this because there are a lot more people in smaller shops than there are people in big shops. But if we can help, and particularly as Eva did earlier with the work with the labor department, put these into some categories, it provides some advice, some guidance for people who are trying to work on this in here. So anyway, just some thoughts around that, and things that we need to do clearly is look at curriculum development and clusters and things like that in that type of a concept. So Eva, we've talked a lot about these things, and Mehmet put together a wonderful wordle here for us. What is happening in the educational career field as you're working towards these?
So as you've mentioned, and both you and Mehmet have pointed out, I mean, there's definitely, we need to look at this from a path perspective in terms of thinking about developing the capabilities or the competencies for people who might eventually want to end up in this field, but also, even if you go all the way back to thinking about developing skills and competencies in high school and earlier in problem solving that help prepare people for these kinds of jobs. But over the past 10 years, Data Management Association in particular has been actively involved in a profession. We are beginning to really to mature as a profession, and you can see that in education, and you can see that in credentialing, and those kinds of things that happen in a real profession, really established profession like a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant. So one of the attempts that one of the areas that DAMA has been involved with has been creating a DAMA curriculum framework. Back in 2005, a group of us got together who were mostly transplants from industry into education who found that there really wasn't good guidance. And so you can move on to the next slide, Peter, but we'll move through these next few pretty quickly. So this was done and published it was presented at the IS Education Conference and published in their journal. And just first stab at identifying job clusters, and at that point we really were beginning the body of knowledge. Now, a recent search on the web I just did, there are other curriculum models developing. So you can see this one that I found based on frameworks for data management curriculum. And it's not exactly the same as the DAMA framework, but again, different ways of looking at that. The other thing that we're seeing is that there are more master's degree programs and certificate programs coming up. As you mentioned, Peter, community colleges have been are a good place for these kinds of things because we have the flexibility to be able to quickly develop programs to meet industry needs. A lot of times the four-year universities have a harder time being nimble and getting programs in place. So as I mentioned earlier, at Edmonds, we were able to get a grant to work on self-paced programs that are designed for working professionals and that lead to a certification. And the CDMP, the Certified Data Management Professional, is one of the areas we chose to work on, and we'll see how that goes. So the other thing we've seen is more online career guidance. I thought this was particularly interesting because DAMA is specifically called out as a place to go to find out more information about how to become a data management analyst. So it shows that this is evidence to me that all the work that we've been done to build the profession with DAMA is starting to take hold, is starting to be used, is starting to be recognized and make its way into those areas that can actually help people find these jobs. And find out about the profession.
I got a call from the federal government recently where they wanted to have a number of CDMP people who had 20 years experience with the CDMP. And I thought that was a terrific thing, but it's also a physical impossibility since the CDMP has only been around for a couple of years at this point. There are about 1,600 professionals worldwide that have been designated with this. You're talking to two of them on this particular call here.
Yes, and there's quite a bit of interest. I know in the Seattle chapter we have there's a lot of interest. We run 2 workshops a year just to get people certified, and so this is an area. It's growing slowly, but we do have a professional certification, the Certified Data Management Professional. It is based on the data management body of knowledge, the wheel of knowledge, as Peter pointed out, that is really kind of put a stake in the ground related to what's the scope of data management work and what are the functions and the kinds of things that you need to know in order to be successful, the principles underlying it. So the knowledge pieces of it, the skills necessary, and of course the attributes are the things that the individual who is drawn to this profession brings to the table. So we've aligned all of the exams to the body of knowledge, and as we're continually refining it. So the data management body of knowledge is currently in development of the 2nd version. You can see that we've added new functions. The data integration and interoperability was in response to the data community saying, hey, this is a very important function that we need to call out. And of course, we've continued to refine data modeling and design has really been a refinement of the data development piece. So there's a lot of work Pat Coopely and Deborah Henderson are working on related to getting the data management body of knowledge new version published.
Again, more volunteers who are trying to push this noodle up the hill, and one of the reasons we wanted to do this webinar was to hopefully entice some of you that are listening to come and participate. Now we're getting ready to move into the Q&A section here in just a second, but again, just to recap a couple things that are coming up. Enterprise Data World is our big conference. It's going to be in Austin this year. Austin's a great music city, and we'll have some music, and hopefully we'll get to see Mehmet dance and Shannon do some singing down there. And you can also, of course, see the other things that are happening at Dataversity here. And we're running a fairly academic-ish conference in late July. You can see it down at the bottom with the Global Organization Design Society here. If any of these look interesting to you, we'd love to talk to you more about it, because we just are very much resource constrained and dependent on the really excellent efforts of people like Mehmet and Eva, who've been working with us over the years on this. So we're back to the top of the hour here, and really this is the part we've been looking forward to. So we've presented a lot of material, but what we'd like to do is spend some time and talk to you all about what sort of questions we can say. If it's a question of how do you get involved, reach out to us. That's easy. But more importantly, perhaps, let us know what your thoughts are on this. Again, it was an enlightening thing to me to see that Eva and Mehmet had sort of co-evolved in the same direction, and that we are starting to see some movement around here. So, Megan, we'll pull back over and see if anybody's tweeting at us or anything else in the way of tossing questions.
All right, thanks, Peter. Thank you, Eva and Mehmet as well. That was an awesome presentation. It's now time for our Q&A, time for you all to ask your questions. So just click on the Q&A window feature. It's at the top of your screen. You should be able to submit your questions through that window. And we've had a few come up, so we can just jump right into it. The first question is, how and where can you break into the data profession field as a newly college graduate and is not in a non-IT discipline?
So
I can repeat that.
That's great. And first of all, we didn't actually have library science up there on that, and that was not an intentional slight to library science. They're an obvious group that should come at this. But Mehmet, you do all kinds of hiring of different people, and Eva, you do all sorts of career advising. So Mehmet, why don't you go first, and then we'll let Eva take it. Maybe we should do Eva first and then Mehmet. Are you on mute, Mehmet?
I can tell you what, I get this question almost probably once every couple of weeks now in my current role, but a lot more often in my teaching role. But it's often what I tell people is you need to set your eyes on the prize and look at those areas that you're interested in, and then get your foot in the door somewhere. So if you're coming in from a business perspective, get into a business analyst type of role. or a type of role where you're working with data in some way in an industry and really get to know that industry. And then you'll look for opportunities on your job where there's more and more opportunities to work with data as a data steward, for example, in your area, or in helping people to analyze reports or do reporting. And then from there you find a mentor and you start to get involved with DAMA and network and start to get your way into the profession.
And at Data Blueprint, we typically will take on an intern or two each semester just to look for people who have a keen interest in this area. Mehmet, are you back with us?
Yes, I am. My line was muted. In my part, you can decide on which function you want to go after or what kind of company you want to go after in order to get your foot in the door. And once you are there, there is so much data everywhere that you can look at, what for opportunity you may want to pursue. I started getting paid in the IT field as a help desk rep. I was on level 1, level 2. Then I was, the level 4 escalations eventually. And even then, this is many years back, I was fascinated by the type of queries that were coming in. And I remember running reports. I think it was Remedy. We were just switching to at the time to try to find out why do we get a lot of calls in certain times. And the question I was trying to answer was to improve our processes. And the way I thought to look at it was through data, and I made proposals to my supervisor saying, hey, here's the data that I see. And you're working with a spreadsheet at that point, right? So the more generalized answer is, if you want to apply for data-specific positions versus being in a company and then going into the data role, start playing with data in whatever medium that is accessible to you. So when you encounter someone looking to hire somebody, they give you a good path for your passion, your curiosity, your ability to take risks and make hypotheses, because that is what is harder to develop people in. And if you were to catch me at an event and make that case, you're absolutely going to have my attention. And even if I don't have something, I can try to, get you in touch with someone who can. If you want to work for a company and then get involved in data, it's even easier because you have many more opportunities. And then find a specific business problem you want to solve or you think that needs to be solved. And then see if you can improve the way it can be managed. To this date, I engage with my finance partners in my organization as part of the budget I end up being responsible for. And one of the first things is, what are the numbers we are trying to manage to? How do we have visibility to it? And how do we ensure that the information is good and it is timely and it is accurate to minimize the risk? So there is data analysis and data action opportunities everywhere.
Mehmet, it sounded like you were also talking specifically about the role of mentoring. Eva, I wonder if you have looked at that from the curriculum perspective. I don't know exactly how a mentoring context would fit there, but and certainly if we get a flood, we won't be able to mentor everybody, but certainly that seems like an important component.
Well, I know one of the things that I've done over the past 10 years is a lot of times I invite the students that are interested in pursuing this to our local data management chapter, and that's a really good opportunity for them to talk with and network with people in the profession. And often they will find somebody who's interested in mentoring them, or they'll get actively involved in the chapter. And I think it's really important for all of the people working in the profession to be willing to reach out and help somebody who's interested in this, because there's a lot of enthusiasm there.
So mentoring, looking Mehmet up at a meeting and stalking him, I think that was an open invitation for some friendly stuff. And again, certainly paying attention to some of the other things. Go ahead, Mehmet.
Honestly, and yes, I am doing this to promote a conference that helped me be much deeper in my career, but if someone is actually willing to take the time to show up at an event, whether it is Enterprise Data World or a different conference, and they've done their homework to actually want to have a productive conversation on here's what I'm interested in, where can I go? I would be foolish not to engage with that person because such people are so rare in our field, and who knows what's going to happen. I'm opening recs, trying to step up my team at different levels of experience. In general, I have customers that are trying to hire people in different geographies, so absolutely. The caveat is, if you are doing that, have a clear idea of what you want to do beyond the generic question and asking to find all the answers, which is what I actually coach to people in college when I do career programs, when I stop by at career fairs from time to time.
Excellent. Well, Megan just passed me a note and said there's a lot of questions. Megan, what's the next one up?
Okay, the next one is, let me see here. What's the difference between data analytics and data analysis from your perspective?
Matt, you probably thought more about that.
Analysis is the concept of analyzing data, right? And analytics sounds like a particular implemented version of it. You can have a data analytics solution through reporting, just like people used to say business intelligence is a reporting tool. Like business intelligence is finding out what is the information needed to drive the business operations more effectively, supported by data technology and processes. That's my shortest answer.
And I think the confusion around that is something that we'll continue to try and address. I also see analytics as a bit more tool-focused, perhaps, than the analysis part of it. Eva, anything on that one?
No, actually, you are. I would defer to Mehmet on that.
Great, Megan. Next question.
Alrighty, the next question is, do you have any defined roles and responsibilities for each of the various levels of data governance professional?
I should have one in about 2 to 3 weeks.
Excellent. So another plug to come see you at the conference or look you up on the web on that. He's not hard to find. He's just hard to pin down. So something coming. Good. Excellent. Next one, Megan.
Okay, the next question is metadata management a function of data warehouse, BI, or data quality?
I'm going to go with neither on that one.
Really? No, I actually would go that one. So one of the things we tell people and where we see projects get in trouble is that they're trying to go with more of a single solution on this. So when I look at most data warehouses, they fail because they are on trying to do a one-legged stool, and they focus on the data warehousing technology, and the software, of course, works very, very well. But if you put a warehouse in place without a governance and a quality component to it, the quality of the warehouse becomes very, very poor very quickly, and it's very difficult to work within that. So I would very definitely see that what we really need, again, goes back to Mehmet's comment about holistic thinking. We want people that can put the right governance around this. And the question was specifically about metadata. Here's my answer on that. If you have a data governance group, the language that they should speak is metadata. So take that and run with it, I guess.
Yeah, and the reason I said neither is the question almost sounded like it should belong under one of the buckets. Each of those, as well as application development, have metadata associated with it. So
yes,
it is not a singular function.
I would wholeheartly agree with that. That was my first reaction too. Is that in a sense we're dealing with working with metadata in all areas of the wheel in the body of knowledge. But I think that even though it's one function and there's a function in terms of managing metadata, understanding and working with it is important to data management.
Okay, I hope that answered that, Megan.
All right, great. The next question is, we're not seeing much take-up of the data analyst title. Data engineer does seem to be exploding. What are you seeing?
So I guess from different perspectives, Mehmet, as a hiring manager and as somebody who participates in hiring manager activities, among other things that you do, what question of engineer versus analyst?
So
I'm guessing that's Stephen that asked that question. So hi, Stephen.
Purely for semantics, we are not engineering data, right? You can write derivation logic, which could be a part of somebody's role, but engineer is someone to me that builds analyst is someone that analyzes. So if you're looking at it purely from a title update perspective, I would look at the job description, and I would look at whether the job descriptions are being written accurately or not. I get tapped sometimes internally from other groups and by many of my customers trying to figure out how to write things in general, and I would just say look at the meaning of the words.
And words are important.
And I'm still seeing a lot of requests for data analysts. I'm hearing requests for database engineers or software engineers with a data focus, but I haven't heard of data engineer as a higher trending title, at least in the Bay Area, and that is including attending the Data Week conference for the last 3 years.
Eva, any insight there?
Well, I think about John Baxman's framework in terms of the different roles, and engineer is has a place in the total view, but I think a lot of times the titles that go along with jobs are not necessarily descriptive of what their real role is, and so I think we see a lot of data. We could put data architect, data analyst, data engineer, data evangelist. That's a new one I think we can start. I think that part of the work that we all need to do and the challenge is to try to rein in some of these job titles. The IIBA is also working on similar things with business analysis because it's all over the board, and organizations don't really understand what those roles are. So the more we can provide information to help guide that, the better, I think.
Excellent. And I'll just add in that I agree with Mehmet's focus on the title, because an analyst analyzes and an engineer engineers, and those are distinct knowledge, skills, and abilities that we need to apply to these things. However, one of the reasons we in the data community have had such trouble getting the rest of IT to understand is because IT is not taught architecture and engineering concepts, period. They learn business concepts, they learn computer science concepts, which are distinct from these, and it's very difficult to implement any sort of IT solution without a well-engineered pile of data, if you will, or a well-architected pile of data, and the two have to occur in the same way. An architect is necessary to put in place large, complex initiatives, and engineers are necessary to implement the architectural visions around those. But I would also agree that again, we've got to be careful with the title specifically. Megan.
All right, and the next question is, how has the role of data scientists been compared with the field of operations research?
So I'm going to jump in on this one because I've seen in the last 5 years about 100 universities take their OR and decision science curriculum and rebrand it as a data science curriculum. And that I think may be partly behind what the question is. I think they are similar and certainly complementary. But again, let's turn it over to Eva, who's really looking at some of those pieces. Eva, how would you look at that?
Well, again, I can only see from the perspective of the types of academic programs that are emerging, and my concern is that maybe data scientist is the new hot, term, which is not such a bad thing because it's bringing focus to this whole area. And but I do, I don't know, yet whether we've really sorted out exactly what all of those are. A computer science seems to be the one that's moving toward the data scientist types of things with statistics, a lot of the statistical and different types of skills in that area. And again, of course, big data seems to be driving a lot of that because there are those are hot jobs. There are people at least see those as hot jobs. And so I think that, I think it's all good, and eventually we're going to sort it all out.
Although sooner will be helpful. Mehmet, any comments on that?
No, I think
data scientists.
My team rolled out the first big data solution into production, 2+ years ago. So we definitely have them. We use them for different purposes. We use it for operational intelligence. We use it for, product intelligence. We use it for internal data quality operations. One of the things, I've worked on is how to assess data quality in the huge data-rich environment with multi-sourcing, not calling it big data per se. And it's a key area of research for us also. On the specific questions, I think in the 80s we had quants, and operations research really took it from a management science perspective. I think fundamental principles are the same, and the more of it we can do, I'm all for it.
More attention will help us get more energy behind it and more people joining the conversation, and hopefully we'll get it sorted out. But I also have a problem in particular with the term big data, because every definition I've seen of big data is absolutely not operationalizable. We can identify big data techniques and big data technologies, and I'd encourage those of you listening that if somebody comes at you and starts babbling to you about big data, if you can say, can we have a different conversation? Instead of using the term big data, could you use the term big data techniques or big data technologies? Because we can identify those. We can, in fact, put them together. But we absolutely can't identify big data in and of itself, given the current definitions that we have for it. And that, of course,
that's a traditional challenge we've lived for the last, 20, 30 years, so right? Big data is a technology approach. Data warehouse is a technology approach. It may absolutely be the best implementation approach to answer the business problems. Coming back to the abilities slide that, Eva talked about, we are effective resources for our business, for our customers, if we can help figure out the right questions and then the answer to those questions. And the answers may not always be 100% up to date, 100% accurate. We need to quantify the currency of the information. We need to quantify the likely accuracy of the information. But this is what we are fundamentally about as data professionals. And then whether we are analyzing that data, we are architecting solutions that integrate and deliver that data. We are making sure that data is being secure and compliant to adhere to our organizational principles are the details about our individual roles in our organization. Because I don't even use the word big data when I talk to any customer about their intelligence needs. And if we happen to report or recommend a Hadoop cluster with various other things, that's what we can talk to the IT engineers about, or the sysadmins about, or the application architects about. The problem starts with the definition of the business need.
Absolutely. Megan, next question.
Okay, the next question is, as a liberal arts graduate who has many years in the data field, how significant do you think the current emphasis on STEM is as a preparation for working with data?
That was STEM, S-T-E-M?
Yep.
Okay, so science, technology, engineering, and math, we know we have a big deficit in this country, and we're trying to address that. So there are all sorts of movement around the STEM curriculum. My answer to that is particularly that if you are a knowledge worker, you need to know something about data. And I'll just give a little shout-out to a book that's one of my favorites. It's called The Information by James Glick, who's the same guy that popularized the term chaos in the world. It's a terrific book, and it gives you a little bit of background if you're not as familiar with this area. It'll help somebody who's been in the field to understand sort of the formal definitions and things like that. Again, Eva, comments on this?
Well, so, when we talked earlier, there are so many different aspects of data. And I think, again, one of the earlier slides we talked about, there's the technology side of working with data. There's the analytical side of working with data. There's also many other types of professions that, involve working with people to pull out information, semantics, and, understand the definitions of data. And so, really, as a liberal arts graduate myself as well, I feel like those skills have been incredibly important. The communication skills, the ability to be able to recognize patterns is something that you learn in other areas as well. So I think that there's room for everybody. I think that the current trend towards the data scientist is trying to put more of the STEM perspective because there's more math involved, there's more understanding from that perspective, scientific problem-solving types of skills that you learn in STEM. So I think that you really can come. There's a place for you and for your skills, no matter what background you have, because there's areas where you can apply that.
And Mehmet, you have 3 daughters, if I recall?
2 daughters.
2 daughters, there we go. Are they headed for a STEM career?
Honestly, my focus is getting them to focus on making decisions effectively and figuring out what is it that they want to make a decision on. My older daughter has found fashion design. She's 9. As her passion of interest, and until I met another good friend of mine who's in fashion design, I did not realize how much math is actually involved in it, because there's the math of making something work, there is the understanding of the flexibility of different type of fabrics that they have to consider, there's the economics of it. So the idea of liberal arts, I think, is something, having been an engineering math business major academically, I fully understood or appreciated, and now that I've been in my career, I absolutely appreciate the richness of it. So I think it's about the subject area effectiveness, especially when it comes to K-12 education, versus whether it is a bachelor's degree or a liberal arts degree.
Excellent. You wanted to comment on slide 14 too.
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring this in slide up, since we skipped over it fairly quickly as I was going through that. You heard us, I think, refer to what you are doing in the role, and this is a high-level framework that on a phone call we actually came up with in the past. That we had a moment of epiphany. Fundamentally, we are passionate about one of these things. Whether we either want to work with data or we like to work with systems. And if you think about your colleagues, they either want to work with data or with systems that touch the data. And then within that, there are different things people like to figure out. Some people absolutely love writing code. I enjoyed writing code. That's not what I was passionate about. I liked figuring out how systems worked. And, if you were to look at this chart and look at the top level words, there are probably 2 of these that you're going to relate a lot more to than the others. That is how you can think about the type of roles you can be most effective in, because you would be following your passion, and then you can look at the job expectations for the roles that typically fall in that type of it.
And since it's an epiphany, all 3 of us say we copyright it at once, and then we'll be protected, right? Megan, next question.
All right, we have about 5 or 6 questions left, so we'll go on to the next one, see how much time we have, and if we don't get to any of them, they will be in the follow-up email with answers. So on to the next one. The next question is, I'm in a BA role in IT group in capital markets. What is your recommendation on how to go about creating standards and processes for data quality and governance where none exist and is not in the current culture?
I guess the DIMBOK would be a good place to start on that, where we do have a chapter on data quality. I have to apologize. It was the last chapter we put in the DIMBOK, and that was a bad thing on our part, because quality should never be last on that. But it'll certainly give you a framework for starting to look at resources and different approaches. That is probably more than we can get into here. Quick, Eva and Mehmet, any other things to point this individual to?
I would actually say pick a problem or an opportunity and put focus behind that one. And then find a mentor, tap into that. I'm going to go much more practical in this case. The DIMBOK would be great for personal knowledge. If you're trying to make a case, given your role, and try to emphasize it, people are going to need something that's going to resonate for them. And what I found, unfortunately, one of my earlier learnings is the quality of the architecture plans on the knowledge you have doesn't help you push for the right initiative if people do not have a sense of urgency to move in that direction.
Fair point. Eva, any quick comments?
I would add to that, too, is that, as an analyst, I think that is a really important role to begin to have conversations about data and the discussions that you're having with the various areas of the organization, and, focusing on those and starting to raise the importance. It's a culture change in a lot of organizations, I think, and I've been there too. I understand. It's something you have to start raising awareness and then begin to bring in a discipline. I think using some of the tools and the other experts that are out there in the field. There's a lot of information out there through various channels on the web, and lots of people in our community that are writing about this. So, I agree with Mehmet. Pick a problem and start focusing it from a data perspective.
Great. Megan, next one. Try and speed up here a little bit.
Do you feel data and programming are coming back together again? For a while, many programmers seem to treat the data as a black box.
So I think the answer to that is no. And I'm just going to say my experience is that people are really interested in making programming go faster, looking at very interesting methods around agile and things. And the way to speed those up is to take the data out of it. Don't let those things start unless they fully understand the data requirements. You'll be amazed at the difference that makes.
I unfortunately agree with Peter, and I think there are two reasons for it. People that are hearing more about data and the push for data is coming from lines of business more than technology and IT. And if you think about a lot of people that are in IT management positions, many of them came from the traditional infrastructure or application development background versus data background. So I think it is going to be a slower transition. Now, I do expect the transition to occur, and I think what's going to happen is people are going to start realizing who's being more successful and why they are being more successful. And if we end up having more conference sessions on the positive deviance, then I think we will see a bigger mind shift. I know that if I'm brought into a conversation at a customer site and they want to understand how to make it work, they typically ask the question, who has done this well? And they look at other examples of where is something working better to hold up as a benchmark.
Mehmet, you mentioned specifically starting to report results, and of course that's one of the things we're all looking for. Where can we put in place some A and B experiments? If your organization has multiple implementation projects going on, you can try some one way and some another way, and then come back to us and tell us collectively as a community what has worked and what hasn't worked. And that's been a piece that hasn't been an area of research in that thing, and I think that's something that we could all benefit from. Just got a quick note from Shannon. She said we can keep going because there's still a bunch of questions on this. So Megan, next question.
Okay, great. The next question is, do you view the skill of logical data modeling as a distinct skill set, or can it be done just as well by a BA, DBA, or data analyst?
So I'm going to jump in on that one and say, first of all, the title of the person who does the work has not correlated to the quality of the effort that comes out of it. We've seen lots of these things where people will actually invent data modeling on their own and come up with it. If you're interested in this as a deep topic, one of our also favorite people here, Graham Simpson, did his PhD dissertation research around that very question and published it in a book, and I'm looking on my shelf right now to see if I can find the title. If you look him up on Amazon, you'll see he's Graham Simpson, and he also has a popular novel. He's changed careers now on that. But anyway, that's a very, very deep dive into that specific question. But again, Eva and Mehmet, what do you guys think?
Oh, first of all, I have to say that, so I learned data modeling back in the early 90s when I worked for EDS. And that skill, once I had that skill has served me through, I continue to refine and improve. It's not something that you just know. It's something you're constantly practicing. But I've used it in so many different contexts as a business analyst, as a, just to help me understand a problem or help other people understand a problem. It's, people who know me know that I'll start drawing up on the board. And I do think it's a skill that you can use, across all different areas and in many different areas.
No, agreed. It is a skill versus a role. I think to be an effective business analyst, you should be familiar with how to understand information requirements. Absolutely, to me, that is a must-have. Now, if you can then take that and put it in a model that's going to be effective based on the consumption or storage needs, that's great. To me, a data modeler as a profession is someone who does that primarily, but I would expect a data modeler to be able to gather business requirements, do some basic data analysis, understand the system implications of their models the more senior they become also.
Megan, would you read that question one more time just to make sure we did address it?
Sure. I find that the technicians list DBA or data analyst. Oh, wait, that's not it. I'm sorry. I was jumping ahead.
Not that jet-lagged.
There we go. Do you view the skill of logical data modeling as a distinct skill set, or can it be done just as well by a BA, DBA, or data analyst?
So I think the answer to that was resoundingly yes from the three of us then.
Yes, although I do think that understanding the difference between physical modeling a logical model and modeling a physical database structure is important. And I found that
dangerous.
Yes, and so I think that understanding the difference and using logical modeling is important if you're in any of those roles.
Great, good question, Megan.
Okay, we actually just have one more. How are the roles expressed in this presentation determined as roles as managed under technology or business?
So, Mehmet,
yes.
What do you put into?
These days? So I actually report into a group called Customers for Life, which is at the executive level. This is the group that is accountable for ensuring customer adoption of Salesforce technologies. As a company, we have a different, perhaps different model than many other technology providers that after someone buys the product, then there is still continuous engagement because we want them to, use it, get the return of investment out of what they got. And, sometimes it is adding more services to it. Sometimes it is understanding what our best practices. Sometimes it's training. We have a holistic engagement model. And my latest role is, building up a data-centric consulting organization because we saw so much demand in this particular field. And part of it is, making sure we understand the customer's definition of success.
Eva, are you in a business school, a computer science school, a none of the above and all of the above? How are you teaching? Where did it come from?
Well, none of the above. When I was teaching, it was in the computer and information systems area. I'm now the IT director for the college and e-learning. So what I'm actually practicing. We're doing a lot of data management types of work within the college and among community colleges in the state. So there's it's IT, but it typically, I think it depends on, and this is a whole other topic, I think, for you, Peter, is the capability maturity model of your organization makes a big difference, I think, in how people view and where people view data. So I think that that makes it, where it falls in an organization has a lot to do with how the organization or industry, I think, sees the importance of data.
And one of the reasons Eva was giggling, because she knows I have very strong opinions on this, I believe firmly that data should be treated as an asset and managed at the same level of organizational assets as the other assets of an organization, be they physical assets, be they human assets, lots of other types of assets that are reporting in, and that IT has not been well suited to implement data. And again, it's because of a lot of the reasons that we've talked about here. People don't know what they don't know, so they assume what we've taught them in college and university for the past 30 years is that database design and building and construction and engineering is a technical skill that belongs in the bowels of IT, and I have some research that we've published that shows it's getting pushed further and further away from the top levels of the organization, so consequently people don't have an understanding of how it needs to be used and leveraged in these concepts. So in my mind, it is absolutely a business function, and I want to do that to correct and to help organizations obtain a strategic competitive advantage in the long run. And I'm seeing that is working in most organizations. Again, we will have conversations around that at EDW in particular. They're running a Chief Data Officer event there that will be very, very interesting to see how those pieces are coming together. We'll be presenting some new research that we've put together in there as well. And again, if you want to read more on that, I've got a book out on the topic called The Case for the Chief Data Officer. So, Megan, that's the last question?
Yep, that's it.
So I do want to thank Eva and Mehmet because you both put in weekends and nights on this, including last night, Mehmet in particular. So while I was flying back from San Diego, he was working on some of the final refinements of the slides here. But this has been just, from my perspective, a really, really valuable contribution here. And I want to thank you guys for taking the time to do this. And, of course, for Shannon for letting us present these ideas, because it's not often you can go to a source like this and say, hey, we want to talk about something that hasn't been talked about a lot before. And Dataversity has just been wonderful in that sense to work with over the years.
Well, Peter, this has been just a great presentation, you guys. This is just so engaging. Everyone's really been involved, and thanks to all the attendees who hung in there over the time. It's just been fabulous, and we're always proud to have such engaged attendees and who can contribute to the conversation.
We'll look forward to carrying it on at the conferences then, right?
Yes, exactly. We look forward to it. And, as one of the most popular questions, of course, is if when we'll be sending out slides. I'll send a follow-up email within 2 business days, so by end of day Monday, containing links to the slides, links to the recording, and anything else requested throughout the webinar. I know the DMBOK was mentioned many times. That's, of course, available in our Dataversity bookstore. And Mehmet and Eva, if you want to get Megan your any information to share for your blogs and so on and so forth, we'll get that out to everyone as well that was mentioned. And so thanks, everyone, for this great presentation, and I hope everyone has a fabulous day.
Thanks for letting us go long, Shannon.
Absolutely. It was great. There was no way we could stop it. It was just too good of a conversation.
All right. Well, everybody, we'll talk next time then. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Eva, thank you very much.
Thank you.